Tēnā koutou, e ngā hoa mā, nau mai hara mai ki e Hika. Kia ora, welcome to e Hika. Welcome to this episode. In this episode, in the lead up to Waitangi Day this year, we have a very special guest. Associate Professor Aroha Harris is a recently retired member of the Waitangi Tribunal, an academic, a researcher, a community leader, and my mentor and friend. So it's a great pleasure to have her. Tēnā koe e te hoa, e te rangatira, Aroha. Nau mai, hala mai, whakatau mai ki e Hika. Welcome, Aroha. It's a pleasure to have you here today and to reflect on Te Tiriti and in the context of Waitangi Day this year, but also the future of Te Tiriti, where it's going and where are we headed, perhaps as a people, as a nation, even as a world. Let's be ambitious with this. So, kia ora, welcome, e hoa. Yes, so, Te Tiriti. Could I get you to share a bit, like, when's the first time you heard or became aware of the treaty, Te Tiriti?
Kia ora, tēnā koe e te hoa. I think I may have become aware of the place first, Waitangi, because I remember when I would have been in primary school, my nana, my father's mother, and some of the others around Mangamuka, where he's from, practicing waiata to go to Waitangi, and trying to, being a little kid and trying to keep up with the big kids trying to learn the poi and stuff like that. So that's my sort of earliest, clearest memory that I know is associated with Waitangi. And then as we got older, it was just a place that we kind of used to go to for the day. I don't know, as a kid, it's just somewhere you're going with the adults in your life. You don't know if they're going for a hui or...
just another hui.
Yeah, just another hui, or if it was we were going as tourists, or, but it was, as a kid, it's a place you kind of run around and have a family day. And I was trying to think about this earlier. I mean, I went to Hātohohepa, where we did New Zealand history, but I haven't got a memory of learning about Te Tiriti specifically, but I haven't got very clear memories anyway, except that I know that we did New Zealand history, and not just for 1 year, but for consecutive years. And I know that we did South African history, Irish. So I think by the time I got to uni, we learnt about Te Tiriti in depth. It was familiar to me, but now we were getting into the nitty-gritty and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid and with our Ngāpuhi whānau, and yes, I'm very proud of my Ngāpuhi connections.
And so you should be.
From time to time. And we went on a tour with our great aunt and her husband, and we went to Te I just remember it was only the pirate ship at Hawaii, that kind of, like all the cool bits. So that was, but yeah, going up to... the wharenanga and, just being around there. But again, wasn't aware of the significance, I suppose, and certainly not around Te Tiriti itself. But whakapapatais, the things we learn a bit later, like what are your whakapapatais to?
Yeah, well, our tūpuna Hohepa Otinepura signed Te Tiriti at Waitangi, which has always fascinated me because most of our relations, actually on both sides of the whānau, were really signed either at Hokianga or Kaitaia, those signings. But he was there, by then he was running with the Wesleyans, so signed with his name, and, clearly was there. I've always been a little bit curious about why he was there and who he was with, and I just figure probably with church people is what I imagine. I'd love to know more about his thoughts and thinking on the day and why he decided to sign. But so yeah, there's a direct connection there for us at Mangamuka through him. And then Mangamuka's been one of those places that would send kai over, send paddlers over for the waka. So there's been that connection over time to Waitangi Day. Yeah.
Yeah, so Dad's hone, but Te Kauro o Te Rangi was named after his uncle. Te Kauro o Te Rangi was a Māori battalion, and they were named after the signatory and the waipu at the main signing, which was June 1840, of course. It was wonderful they had that wonderful practice up north, but...
Yeah, where the majority of the signatories signed.
Well, like peer pressure in this line. But and so Te Kauro o Te Rangi is a whakapapa name for us and was kept alive, that whakapapa, and, us signing it because of our relationship with William Williams and our relationship with Christianity and, that trust that later gets eroded. But, that whakapapa connection. Yeah, I think it's important that, it's not a whiteboard, kind of experience. There's real deep connections to it as well, and it's kept alive. But then you professionalised your relationship with the treaty. And so if you could, share a little bit about that path you took, from uni and where that led you in terms of Te Tiriti.
Yeah, so I went... I'm trying to remember the order of things. So I was a researcher for the Waitangi Tribunal in the 90s. I went down there with my shiny Bachelor of Arts degree and was there for a few years as a researcher, and specifically worked on the Taranaki claims at that time. And it's a mixed role, that research. Back then it was anyway, so it was part... quite intense archival research, but also part support for the tribunal panel itself. So you get a mix of those roles. Public service, so I moved into the Ministry of Health, still researching different area, still interested in the Treaty of Waitangi and health in the 1990s, although the Ministry of Health at the time was encouraged to do, not too much treaty stuff because it's fundamentally about land. And of course it's, that's something that's changed, of course, since then.
The treaty was fundamentally about land.
Yeah, well, the claims and settlement side of things was about land, according to some government people. Yeah. But I think that view surely has changed because we already had Māori health providers in the 90s, so that treaty analysis was going to have to come in at some point. But yeah, interesting time to be in that area. And then I came back up to do my PhD at Auckland, where I had previously been taught by Professor Keith Sorensen, who was a Waitangi Tribunal member for a long period, since the 80s, and he was still a member when I went back to do my PhD, and I ended up tutoring for him in his course on the treaty and the tribunal, which after he retired I inherited. and
I failed that paper, by the way, with Prof Sorensen, so yeah, proud moment.
I like to think it's I'm really proud that I inherited that course from him, but I like to think it's a very different course these days. We had different interests. Of course, he's a scholar who's written quite a bit about the tribunal and the way that the tribunal works with and uses and produces history. But we both, although I regard myself as being influenced by him in a really good way, we are very different scholars as well, have been very different scholars. So, I have professionalised my my connections. I like to think a little bit by chance rather than design. I don't think I aspired to be a long-time teacher of the treaty course, as some of the students call it. But that's where I am, and the days I've had where I've thought about, is it time to give that course up? I've decided no, because it still gets good numbers. I still have fantastic discussions with students coming through. It's a subject that changes constantly. There's always new scholarship. It's really hard to keep up. There's always another Waitangi Tribunal report, another inquiry, another headline, another meme. Like, it's just a really productive area. And, I'm still there.
And then the appointment to the Tribunal.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then I got appointed to the Waitangi Tribunal in, I think it was 2008, and appointed to a panel.
What did you do that for? Why did you?
Why did I say yes to the tribunal?
Yes.
Well, I had this very wise friend, because I was seriously considering whether I wanted to be a tribunal member or not. I got invited to be a member, and I really wasn't sure, and somebody suggested to me that it's service, and sometimes we're called to serve. Sound familiar?
You need better friends.
But that's something that really stuck with me, because it's, service is something that my grandmother talked about too. Like, she used to deliver babies, and she called it her compassionate services. And she said it in a way like, those were my compassionate services, dear. What are yours? Like, we should all serve in some way. And so, that really struck a chord with me, and I was happy to serve. I was appointed to the Te Rohe Pōtai panel, Y898, which is Ngāti Maniapoto was a key iwi grouping in that inquiry, and it was great. It was one of the last large inquiries left, and I had an idea that I would like to do this single large important inquiry. I'd like to do that well, and that I would feel like that would be enough. I didn't really want to stay on and on and on, which could have been an option. And I kind of wanted to put some good energy into that work. I think while I was young and energetic enough to do it as well, that was another thing for me. But I was nervous about it right up to the time. So some of the Te Rarawa came with me to Wellington for the handover to the tribunal. And it was right up to the moment that they kind of physically handed me over in the whaikorero process, that I went, oh, it's, it really is real, and I'm going to do it. And some of them had said to me, why don't you wait till you're, done some more work in your current area, and wait till you're older. And I just had this fear of, being the queer falling asleep at the table during the hearing, so my vanity wouldn't let me do it. I had to go while I could.
That, like all of the tribunal claims, there's real pain and grief, associated with it.
Yeah.
How did it, how did you deal with, what you were hearing as you went through it? I mean, must have been really difficult at times, especially over years in the work you did. Yeah,
it is some of the evidence, especially in those areas that suffered, well, not especially, but in all our areas, but, people who are the descendants of those who suffered during the wars and who had direct evidence of how their tupuna were treated. Rangi Alwhia, there's some, and not even, but it continues. And it's, there was a women's panel at one of the hearings, and a woman, she got up and she was talking about her desires for her children in her mokopuna, and she said something like, because when I was growing up, I didn't dream of becoming a cleaner. You know, that's what I do, and it's from that mahi that I do the best that I can for my whānau, but it wasn't my dream. And I just was really, like, struck by that. And it's that thing about, yeah, of course we've got dreams, and we've got big dreams. And the way that history has panned out for some of us, and the way that we experience society, means that we don't fulfill our dreams. And we have to continue on with what we've got and what we can do, and hold those dreams at the same time, and not let them drag us down, and not let them, you know, put us in a position of giving up on ourselves and giving up on our children and our mokopuna. I was so struck by it. But I was also really conscious all the time that it's not that I didn't want to cry. In fact, you know, my tears welled up a lot often. But I didn't want people to be able to read it, and I guess when I say people, I mean the Crown. I didn't want them to read it as bias. I wanted that sort of emotional response to be read as me being a human, for crying out loud. And unlike so many others in that whole Waitangi Tribunal process, I haven't had legal training, you know, and there's certain codes and ways of doing things that I wasn't familiar with, hadn't had practice in. I mean, even cross-examination, which is something that happens often, and I would be asking our chair of the panel, Judge Ambler, you know, to explain to me what's happening. You know, what I don't understand the cross-examination. What are the lawyers trying to get at? And so it took, you know, so it was a really many-sided thing for me as a historian to understand the process as a legal process, to hear the testimony coming from these descendants of Te Rohe Pōtai leaders and people who'd been through the war, the Waikato War, and, you know, to hear about Liwi Maniapoto, hear all those beautiful histories from the direct descendants, and to be taken around their territory. It's an area I wasn't familiar with, that whole sort of West Coast King Country territory. So it was all steep learning curves for me. And the thing that I said often when people ask me about being a tribunal member is, it's the most responsible thing I've ever done, I felt and feel, because you're taking responsibility for a people's past, and, you know, and the responsibility as the historian member lands in the report that is ultimately produced by the tribunal. You know, so you need to hear people and then present what you think you heard. Yeah.
That is, so taking responsibility for a people's past, and in some ways with that wahine sharing about her hopes for their present and their future too. And I'm just thinking, if you look out that window over there, you could see Grey Street, Cameron Street, Colonel Nixon Street. Yeah. You know, they're honouring these people whose devastating legacy we're still living through. It's just incredible, the power of that history. So, did it work? You know, do you feel like it worked for Ngāti Maniapoto, like, and, you know, just broadly? Or, like, we don't like Winston Churchill, but let's paraphrase him, you know, like, the tribunal's the worst choice, except there's nothing better.
Well, I think that's probably a question for Ngāti Maniapoto, but I am conscious that I also ended up on a panel that was an inquiry into the Ngāti Maniapoto mandate. So there were people who disagreed with the group that ultimately had the mandate to proceed with negotiations. And they did proceed, But so did it work? Not without some hurdles. And I don't know. I mean, I guess this is we could say this of any iwi. We don't know really what the internal dynamics are these days. And, once you get a settlement, to me, that's when the hard work begins, especially as governments haven't wanted to settle at hapu level, but it's at hapu level really that we need to make an impact, I think. But the onus is on iwi to make that happen versus the onus being on the Crown in some way to at least share how that pans out and share responsibility for it. So has it worked? I think time will tell. Has it worked for Ngaitahu? I think some people would say, well, from the outside looking in, looks like it's working. Has it, same for Tainui, but they've been going, their settlement date to the 90s. And other people are only 10 years into their settlement, and others are yet to settle. So
Nothing this, powerful and deep and complex and painful is going to be easy, right? So, it's going to be complicated as well.
Yeah.
I think I just produced a meme. And over the course of your time involved with Te Tiriti at a deep level, this idea that we learnt somewhere along the way the entire story of Te Tiriti, and that's it, and that's what we're living off. But actually, there's been a lot of evolution in terms of thinking, discovery, research, even the politics of it, the way we've lived it out. What are some of the big trends, shifts, developments you'd kind of identify over the past few decades? Like the place of the declaration, the principles, what have been some of the biggest movements that you've seen?
Well, the principles, despite popular opinion that nobody knows what they are, or I think the people who need to know what they are know what they are. And to me, there's a kind of surprising consistency in the principles. So if you pick up recent Waitangi Tribunal reports, they'll still talk about participation, protection, partnership is still big. But what's changed, I think, is a kind of refinement of what those things mean, and this kind of push towards, well, what does a true partnership look like? So I think there's a mix of consistency and development, and sometimes it feels like we're sort of still trapped in a 80s interpretation, and maybe that's because of the shorthand that we use, and maybe in practice we're trying to be a bit more refined in our approaches, trying to finesse things a bit more. We probably use tino rangatiratanga or rangatiratanga more, not more frequently, but it's more publicly known as a concept, and you don't have to keep explaining it. So I think that's something that, again, that has been there for all these decades, but has become a bit more pronounced and a bit more understood. Possibly people, maybe there's less public awareness of rangatiratanga being a treaty principle. That might be something. I think there's while I'm speaking about principles, it's probably useful to point out that we used Norman B's instructions to Hobson about the treaty said, he should be operating on the principles of good faith and justice and sincerity. And good faith is a principle that turns up in terms of reference for negotiations. So it's a principle that's lasted the distance. Justice is an old principle as well. So this idea that we shouldn't have or don't need principles, I think, doesn't really work because we're human, maybe. We are principled by nature, and we do have principles that we work with. But sometimes they're so ingrained that we're not aware. And so the good faith principle, I think, is an example of that.
It's like, what are our values, our tikanga that we operate under, and naming that. Right?
Yeah, it's just naming it.
Right.
And I think having a blindness to it is how you end up in that trap of making assumptions about our way is a better way. But if we've forgotten how to articulate what our way is and what it's based on and where it's grounded, and it might be useful to bring it to the fore. And that's the potential of principles, I think. I think I like to think that we're more familiar these days with context. I mean, when I've learnt about the treaty in an academic context, I think I first learned about the text. The Ruth Ross stuff, there's two different texts, they say two different things, this is why they're different, this is how they're different. And, Ned Fletcher's work has kind of shifted that. I'm assuming people have read Ned Fletcher's work.
Got a spare 800 pages? Yeah.
If you've got the time.
Yeah.
But, this idea that actually the English is a reasonable approximation to the Māori version, because sovereignty, not in translation, I'm not talking about translation, but in context, the English version is not seeking the kind of sovereignty that we talk about today. It was a limited type of sovereignty that is actually more akin to kāwanatanga in the Māori version. And the full exclusive and undisturbed possession is the closest English approximation you could get to rangatiratanga. And he's done it by going back into the archives, like deep into the archives, and thoroughly into the archives. And so I think we've got to at least think about that. So he does say, I can't tell you what page number, but he does say somewhere, that this is the opportunity for Pākehā New Zealanders to reacquaint themselves with the treaty and to, understand the meaning in context in 1840. And he doesn't quite get to where I'm going to go now, but, to take some pride in that, to use that as a platform to move into the future, to use it as a way of envisioning a future that could be good and great for everybody, in which we all get to flourish. So he's, that's I would have liked him to have said more about that element, but of course, historians, we're not trained to do that.
Yeah.
And so he kind of leaves his argument with us, but I think there's something there for us to think about. I think probably it's going to take time for his argument to sort of work its way through, if it's going to work its way through. But that to me is in some ways it's not a shift, in some ways it's a return to what it was, but also a return to what Māori have been saying that Te Tiriti means and that the treaty means. So that's so there's always new scholarship coming out on Te Tiriti, and so it'll probably continue to shift. And in a way, this is probably again against some of the arguments that you hear today about, when we keep using, reinterpreting Te Tiriti for today's needs. Well, yes, that would be the point. The that doesn't, it's not wrong, but we can't go back to 1840, we all know that. We want to make something of this historical agreement and to give it, make it useful in the present time. So we do have to think about the present time. There's just,
I think the idea around, people aren't familiar with Ned Fletcher's work, that the two texts are probably more reconcilable than people think, and people might find that shocking because it goes against a well-established kind of narrative, but I suppose the bigger idea is we're constantly learning. We're not stuck in memes. We all remember, or no, we don't. People of our age would remember Waitangi Action Committee. Treaties are fraud. And people, you see that now. People are like, what? But at the time, they had a particular meaning and context to that, so this idea that the treaty can grow and evolve and be living, like you're saying. And so today we weren't really going to talk about, the David Seymours and the little bit, reflection on where to from here for Te Tiriti. And it's 2040. February the 5th, and the people are sitting around reflecting. What do you think whoever they is, will be thinking about Te Tiriti in 2040?
Wow, it's not that far away.
It's not actually, and we could go a bit further out, but, we'll be old enough.
But well, when you asked me to do this podcast, the day you asked me, I heard on the news that the doomsday clock had moved forward to 85 seconds to midnight. And I was like, oh my God, who cares about the treaty? We're all going to hell in a handbasket, it's over.
This is all going on the reel.
No, but I mean the context. I think the thing that scares me about thinking about the future of Te Tiriti is I don't know what the context will be in the future. And I think it's potentially going to be a radically different context. Looking at the last storms and, Te Araroa and Hicks Bay, and noticing that those communities were impacted by the same storm and suffering kind of similar impacts, but also cut off from each other. So cut off from the rest of the country and cut off from each other, and being these little isolated communities, which is exactly what has been forecast for parts of the north with climate change. And so how does what we're doing now in terms of Te Tiriti policy and working with iwi, how is it preparing us for times when we might be completely isolated and insulated in our little communities, completely cut off from each other? If it happens right on a Waitangi week, are people stuck at home, and how do you get, so much business happens during Waitangi week. The ministers are up there, people are booking meetings and hui and, all sorts of things going on for the week. But if you can't get your people there, like how do you prepare for that? And in what ways can Te Tiriti help us prepare for this future that we're not really sure what it's going to look like and what it's going to be, and what are all the different scenarios that we need to be ready for? And again, I'm going to, I guess, get back to principles and values, and this is why 262, right? To, this idea that mātauranga Māori can not just be embraced by the country as a whole, but actually embrace the country as a whole to help us figure some of these things out. And how do we, that very kind of basic idea of whanaungatanga and good relationship and being in good relationship, not just with each other but with the environment, and how do we take those ideas and really ingrain them into how we want to operate as a society and as a nation, and to be good ancestors, good mokopuna, good humans, and to be good to each other and to this place that we all get to share together. So I don't have the answers, but I don't think we've interrogated those ideas thoroughly enough yet to see where we can go. I think a lot of the examples, if we're looking for concrete examples, possibly they exist at the local level, with people who are doing things like community gardens or, support for queer kaumātua, that kind of thing, that happens very locally. And we may not hear about it because it's not, a big porphyry with all the political celebrities
Media.
there. Yeah, and not getting media coverage, yeah.
Yes, so I love that thought of the kind of organic nature of it. Y262 and, the genius of Justice Sir J. Williams, his name be praised. But that quote from the intro, that the status of the treaty goes from that of a breach contract to that of an exchange of solemn promises made about our ongoing relationships. Just, the one idea for us to talk about is, a lot of the work too has been about why we should do these things. And my suspicion is for a lot of Aotearoa, we've answered that pretty well. There's the boomers and the ag crowd and stuff, and they're never really going to accept it, but that's fine. But enough of Aotearoa knows why we need to do this stuff. Although it does need to keep getting renewed, we can't take it for granted. But the next step was, and a lot of the treaty discourse, one way of thinking about it, this breach contract was the why, but the how we're going to live out this exchange of solemn promises about our ongoing relationships.
Well, I think the interesting part to me or one of the interesting words in that quote from the Y262 report is solemn. And, I think about tapu as well. And do we see Te Tiriti as a solemn promise? Do we see it as a solemn exchange of promises? And do we see our relationships as something inherently tapu? I feel like there might be some work there that could be done, because the way that we talk to each other sometimes, to me, is not honouring of a solemn relationship. The way that we behave towards each other, the way that governments and institutions sort of do things without discussion, and it's not even necessarily a Māori thing. It's just relationships with the people that you employ, perhaps, or that you work with. Like, do we see those relationships as solemn, and do we act and behave as if they are solemn, tapu relationships? And I think that often we don't. And I think workplaces are one of those areas where you see that. For so many reasons, which capitalism, hierarchy, this kind of the ways that we think about status. There's so many kind of layers to it. Look, University of Auckland, it's a massive community it's a diverse community. It's the community that had the letter from the 7 professors about mātauranga Māori. It's a community that's working closely with Ngāti Whātua, who's very generous towards us. Give us a Māori name, Waipapa Taumatarau, just, really all over some of the public-facing naming of places and the look of the place, and in so many ways been the most generous people you could hope to work with. And how do you carry that into the future? How do you have it be more than, giving the right advice when it's needed? And how do you make it a genuine, long-lasting, and when I say long-lasting, I mean 100 years down the track. How do you make it that kind of a relationship? And you've got to... you can't... It's not going to happen immediately. You don't wave a magic wand. But, the onus is on the university, the institution, wherever you transport the idea to really commit in a big way. And it means that it can't be conditional commitment. It can't be committed for as long as the funding lasts. It can't be committed for as long as it's palatable to the public. It's got to be all in.
Yeah, I love that idea of this being primarily about relationships. Not the transactional, kind of online, friend and likes. What about in 2040? If we had the confidence, we put aside the treaty. There's quarter around a new constitution, for example, and accepting there's some challenges there, like our tipuna and, how sacred Te Tiriti is, because of that. But, if we were to, trust in our future and say Te Tiriti got us here, will we always need it? If our relationships are in place and mātauranga is foundational, as Y262 said, and could you see a future without it?
Well, to me, that would be the ideal. In an ideal world, it wouldn't be necessary because rangatiratanga would be unthreatened and would be supported and would be protected in law if we still have law, LAW law. In an ideal world, you wouldn't need a Waitangi tribunal because the hutters of the past would have been dealt with, and not just in settlement terms, but in terms of healing and in terms of peacemaking. We wouldn't need a Waitangi tribunal. That would be what a goal. But
let's stay there, stay in that space, because we all know we can all imagine pretty easily the challenges, and so in some ways we'd be living the principles, without needing the document itself. That is,
which doesn't mean the document has no relevance, or you don't just put all the scholarship away and we don't have to read it anymore. It's still part of our history, and that's never going to change.
But there's the one of the challenges with these ideas is that tangata tiriti, that Pākehā in particular, tauiwi, only exist here because of Te Tiriti. So, I know lots of Pākehā who call themselves tangata tiriti and are trying to find an identity for them and their succeeding generations around Te Tiriti. But, what do we say to them? Like, actually, there's other ways to think about this.
Well, then maybe it's not that Te Tiriti is set aside, but that it finds a new purpose or a revised purpose, one that focuses on how we came to be here and why we're in relationship versus the politics of the relationship or what that means from institution to institution, what it means in policy terms, what it means in law. So it's all the mechanics of it gets put away, but we have that fun, it's the relationship making document now rather than the state making document.
And to speak on behalf of Pākehā, I can speak on mum's side. This, I was reading the other day and it was saying tangata whenua, because Māori have this relationship with whenua, yes, but tangata tiriti don't have a relationship with whenua, they have a relationship with te tiriti. And I thought that was, Colin McCann might disagree, music, art, people go hunting, fishing, love, have this Pākehā have a relationship with the whenua. They're not all trying to buy and sell it and, dump their tractors in it. Like, any thoughts around, any thoughts around that?
Well, we've also got, I don't want to say, we've also got a more widespread use of mana whenua now, which also can distinguish between mana whenua and tangata whenua.
Yeah.
I think, that's a tricky one. There's I remember I was in a hui. I hope Pat Toador, I hope she won't mind me quoting her. Someone asked a similar question about, when do Pākehā become tangata whenua? And she said, how long have we been growing peaches here in Aotearoa? Is the peach tree a native tree yet? And I was like, wow, I might use that one day, and here I am using it.
Well, Ngāti Porou, our Ngāti identity is based around a horse, that was imported. Like, we Ngāti, a weed and a horse, we've incorporated that and the kaupoi into our identity.
And I think that's happened in other parts of the country as well. Like, I can't think of something at an iwi level for us, but the way
the musket.
Speaking of, maybe the musket, but maybe at least North Hokianga, Catholicism. Motukaraka's got the only privately owned Catholic church, I think, possibly in the world, but certainly in Aotearoa. I think we do kind of adopt things, and maybe that's what needs to happen. People need to have a bit of patience and wait, and then we'll figure out how we're going to adopt people. It's a hard question. I keep sort of pausing a little bit because the but. But I'm cynical. But I don't trust people. There's all this but. And I guess it comes down to a power thing. Because I don't think being able to say, calling Pākehā tangata whenua, if it ever came to that, I don't think that's an equaliser necessarily. It doesn't change our divergent histories that we've come from. And it doesn't actually change the nature of our relationships with the whenua. So my relationship with whenua is very specific. Very specific to Mangamuka from Dad, and then Miti Miti from Mum. So very specific. And I can't it's not transportable. I can't bring those connections from the north into Auckland with me. I can't take them. And I wouldn't be allowed to take them to other areas. So it's it's hard to think through. I know, yeah. And then you've got, we've all got those Pākehā in-laws that get integrated into our marae, and they're allowed as much as any of us to, tell the kids off for wasting the Milo, or, because they're aunties too at the marae. But again, it's very specific to the marae that they've married into.
And I suppose, I know, as long as health, justice, economic, massive inequalities, entrenched structural inequalities remain, it's a difficult quarter, right? Let's kumbaya this, and then, but we're still going to die younger and be unhealthier and poorer, and the woman who, in the Rohi Pōtai claim, I didn't grow up dreaming to be a cleaner. Well, New Zealand dreamed you'd be a cleaner because you're Māori, like that. Those kind of, yes. Just be realistic about where we're at.
And I think in your, when that's where you are, this idea of being even more generous to people who are not tangata whenua or not mana whenua or not Māori or not iwi, like to be asked for even more, to give even more. And on some days you're probably wondering if people appreciate what you've already given.
Yeah. When the manaki is constantly, drawn on and without any return. We're talking about context, like this populism that we're seeing, around the world, and that, Uncle Winston is drawing on right now and surging up in the polls. And we've lived in relatively comfortable circumstances for the past few decades. Yes, for Māori, terrible statistics, but war's been quite limited for us. We've had increasing incomes, we've had increasing education, Māori participation in education's growing. We've been having this discourse in a relatively comfortable space. And, there's a possibility, like you were saying, things get really uncomfortable pretty quickly between wars, rumours of wars, as Uncle Bob says, and then AI, the disruption of employment, education gets hugely disrupted. We're all going to be poor. And we think, well, bugger Te Tiriti, like you're saying, bugger being generous, bugger these high ideals. Thoughts about, from our history though, our tipuna were going through some desperate times and managed to hold on to these things. Like, you got thoughts about, in desperation, what we might do with Te Tiriti? We're going to dump it or double down on it?
It depends what you think it means a little bit. I'm inclined to say double down. And double down at the hapu, at the local level. Because I think if you can get things operating locally, the bigger picture sort of will improve naturally. That's what I would hope. I'm thinking in environmental terms, or anyway, this is how I've heard some of my uncles talk about it. If they look around the hokianga, so much work is going on in the hokianga because it's, different forms of degradation, and there's quite a bit of attention on the harbour. And I've got some uncles who say, well, if we paid attention to the little streams at home in our backyards, that's actually going to be good for the harbour. Like looking at the wrong thing. And I think about our communities in that way. The difficult question for me is that you're right. I've come through at a good time. No world war for me. Some sort of working class style poverty, but not like still got fed and sent to school and clothes, and they might have been handed down 3 times by the time they got to me, but still presentable. So I don't know what the natural instinct is when it comes to war. I kind of feel like it's going to be protect the family, and that's why I'm thinking double down on Te Tiriti, but take it local. Partly, though, I do think that we've been a bit slow coming to interpret the Te Tiriti at the local level, that we could have done that in an earlier decade, and I think things might look differently because we wouldn't have had to wait for wards on local government, local councils, that sort of thing. We wouldn't have had to wait so long for that. It would have already been happening. And that's where really important decisions get made about our community. So, that's another reason that I'm saying double down and go local. But my honest answer is I don't know. Because I don't know the ideals that we've been talking about are ideals that work if there's some consistency about the environment in which we're operating. And I don't know that we're going to have that consistency over the next, even to 2040. We don't know if there's some big disaster around it, whether it's going to be a plague or a weather event or a war or, I think there are local initiatives happening all the time and that we're not always aware of them. In a way, just looking after a marae is a local initiative, and keeping a marae open, healthy, well maintained. Some marae have orchards or gardens or, a couple of head of cattle ready to go for hui if needed. So even just that kind of really quite common way of looking after marae, I think, is a local form of what I'm talking about. And I know not all marae are equal in that sense. Not all marae have a robust taumata that's available, freely available. So many components in a marae. So many components. You got to have, you're sort of under the Māori Land Court system because of the Māori land. You've got major buildings, community buildings to look after. You've got to understand what the local authority, local government rules are for your marae. There's everyday looking after it. It's just, and then there's the people, because there's no marae without the people. You've got to have all that tikanga in place. There's it must encapsulate everything that we need in a way. So that might be an example that is too familiar to us for us to realise it's an example. But I think it's there, and I think there might be, if we take a closer look, there might be some lessons for us as well.
And Te Tiriti sits in there somewhere. Like the various dimensions of all the expressions of it. Okay, just to finish, it's a bit of a simplistic exercise, but if we go 10 years ago today, like Waitangi Day, and then say 2040, out of 10, how Te Tiriti, the treaty, its place in New Zealand society, its importance, its respect, the way it's held, the way it influences policy, all the many dimensions of, it's a huge question. But out of 10, so 10 years ago, it was, we're old now, 2006. But like in the general context of things, Chris Finlayson, if it was national, they're doing a lot of settlements and things, like it's an interesting time. A lot of child poverty. If you had to pick out of 10, where was it then? Where is it today? And where you think it might be in 2040?
So 10 being good.
Yeah.
Goodish.
Yeah.
Then 2016. See, the temptation is to say that we've been backsliding under the current government. Am I allowed to say 6'7"?
Yeah.
Oh, 6'7", 6'7".
Kids will love it. I don't think there'll be a lot of kids watching.
Or maybe I'm looking at the wrong place for an answer. Maybe Parliament and politics is not the place to look for the answer to taking the temperature of Te Tiriti. Because I think, there was a survey that came out today showing that 3/4 of the people surveyed, think that there is a place for Te Tiriti and that it should be protected in law. So
Matariki and stuff since then,
yeah, we've had matariki since then. Waitangi is a much bigger affair now than it once was, and although it's been more than just the 6th of February for quite a while, for a long time it was mostly Māori gathering earlier in the week. And now, like I was saying earlier, these people go and do business, which is interesting to me because we haven't talked about he whakaputunga, but the congressional approach proposed in he whakaputunga of everybody coming together to discuss, kind of getting that way at Waitangi every year, in terms of the iwi chairs forum meets the Prime Minister, that sort of thing. Of course, I don't think hui once a year is enough, but it's headed that way. It's really what do you do with the outcomes of the hui, that sort of thing. So maybe for me, there's not much difference between 2016 and 2026.
On the ground.
Yeah, on the ground. Maybe for me, or maybe my thinking is spoilt by being a historian and I want a longer run at it, so take me back to or 1926 or something.
Yeah.
But 2040, well, this is I think for 2040 to get to a 10, we need more people engaged in the vision and engaged in the possibility and engaged in thinking about the future, and people who can affect change, getting engaged in the future. I think that's and to me that means getting out of the transactional relationship. So moving beyond the settlement stuff, and I know that I was quite conscious of the settlement stuff because Ngāpuhi's still on that pathway towards settlement, or maybe not on that pathway, maybe took a different route. But to get out of that space, because it's quite, what's the word? It's quite a constrained or restricted space. When you're thinking negotiation, settlement, you're trying to, it's transactional, you're trying to get the deal, land a deal. And, you don't want that to keep you from thinking about the future more. And I'm not saying people aren't thinking about the future. I'm just saying when your energy gets drawn into that space, you've got less to give to think about the possibility and the vision. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, look, that is hopeful. I think, again, this Waitangi, particularly with the politics, there's going to be a lot of kōrero around current circumstances with the election coming up and what are the permutations there. And that's all important. And a lot of people have that kōrero, but I think I wanted to get some insights and some of your wisdom and experience in terms of, what else can happen. So I think relationships, I'm thinking the kind of the story, the power of it, and where we're going. So thank you, Ep4. Thank you for that kōrero today. It was fascinating, insightful, as always, and thought-provoking. And, I hope you have a happy Waitangi, and, wish everyone out there too a happy Waitangi. As we celebrate, commemorate, grieve, have joy for who we are as a people. So kia ora tātou.